Hi, and welcome to the Personal Side of Business, where every business has a story. Today, my guest is Matt Paré. He's a successful injury attorney here in San Diego. Matt is not only successful legally, but he is one of the most worldly and traveled persons I know. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Well, thanks, Jet. I appreciate you having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So tell us, how did we get here?
Well, so I grew up in Maine. I grew up in a small town in Maine, and then I went to college in Boston. I lived in D.C. for a little bit, too, and then came out to California in 2005 for law school and for the adventure of it. So that was 20 years ago at this point. Came to law school at California Western in San Diego, and then worked at a law firm for a year, and then went out on my own, had that entrepreneurial spirit, and then ever since then, things have been going quite well. So,
Did you visit California prior to coming out?
Yeah, definitely been a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And at that time, especially growing up maybe in a small town on the East Coast, California had this certain, reputation or sort of allure to it. So, yeah.
And it's pretty different from Maine. I've been to Maine, and wonderful people, everyone's nice, but the winters get pretty cold, right?
Extremely. Yeah, it can snow like 9 months out of the year. So it's a very different climate completely. But, we're big skiers too, so I like to ski. So we enjoy the snow, but the weather overall here is much better.
Actually, that's something that you just remind me that you've been. I remember you mentioned to me a while back that you ski a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's from the New England or the Northeast,
Yeah. So, growing up, it was definitely part of our family's activities. But then more recently, I taught all three of our kids, and they're expert skiers too. And, last winter we went to Japan skiing, and then also to the Swiss Alps and stuff like that. So they've been different places, and they're all really good.
Nice. And, I think that's a great segue into one of the things that fascinates me about you is the amount that you have traveled, especially with your family, right? So I'm just going to kind of dive into it. How many countries have you been to? Do you know?
It's 47. Yeah.
Wow.
So quite a few. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people like to travel, and who doesn't like to go on vacation, right? But I would say one of the things perhaps that makes it a little bit more unique in our case is that we do travel with 3 kids.
Yeah.
And then number 2, sometimes it's to some places that are off the beaten path, right? And so whether it's the Middle East or Africa or South America, Asia, different things like that. But I've just made it a priority in terms of, my own personal values as far as valuing experiences over possessions or objects. And so I think that it's not only a lot of fun, but it also, the more places you see it broadens your perspective and your understanding of the world and your appreciation of different things. So it's just a passion, and so as much as we can, we get out there with the family and go on an adventure.
Do you think one of your driving forces for traveling is to get your kids to experience, and I don't know if did you get to travel when you were younger as much?
Yes, not to the same degree.
Yeah.
We did some traveling, less international traveling, but so.
But your kids get to, this is amazing for them, right? I think it's such a great way to help culturalize, to see things that normal kids wouldn't get to see. And now they're probably holding on to these and I would say, becoming better humans as they grow, right? They get to experience this.
I totally agree. Yeah, completely. Yeah. So they see, the good, bad, the ugly, and everything in between, and get to appreciate certain things that we have here. But then also at the same time, see the beautiful and amazing things that are out there too. So it's all of that is part of it. Of course, seeing different cultures as well, but all the wonders of the world and what have you. But
what do you think has been the most transformative experience that you've gone through traveling?
There's been a number, but for example, interesting. We went to Israel and Palestine to kind of see both sides of that. Before the conflict, but nevertheless, you could kind of get a ground's eye view on some of the feelings people had there. Interesting also to see different parts of India where there's a level of poverty that we don't usually get exposed to, and so just to to see that firsthand was quite eye-opening.
How do you choose where you're going to go next for your family?
There's not necessarily any rhyme or reason to it. My wife and I will just talk about it
Yeah.
and be like, oh, how about there? I haven't been there. And so it's not like super strategic, but whatever kind of we're inclined to at that time. So,
Yeah. That's amazing. And what has been your favorite place that you've traveled to?
It's a good question. I would say, it depends on what category you're looking at.
Yeah.
So for skiing, for example, I would say Switzerland. If you're looking at something tropical, I would say, either Maldives or Bora Bora or Seychelles, which is an island east of Africa, north of Madagascar. So it depends. If you like tropical, there's a few good options there.
Yeah.
I've been to Maldives a couple times, but it's hard to compare something like wintry versus something tropical. But
I get it. And we were talking right before the interview started that I think you've built this situation for your life that you've been able to travel because of the success you've had in your work, your career, right?
Yeah.
What has been some of the things that you felt like has made you a really successful injury lawyer?
Okay. Well, to be a successful personal injury attorney, it takes quite a few things. First of all, you have to be extremely diligent about doing what you're supposed to do. So, self-discipline goes into that. Some of the individual tasks might be, a little bit mundane or even boring, but just to have that discipline to do what needs to be done, that's a huge part of it. Another thing I would say is persistence, right? You have to just keep trying and trying and trying. If you, for example, you might call an insurance adjuster if they don't return your call right away, you got to stay on them. That's just one small example. Another big thing I would say is relationships, right? So as an injury attorney, almost in all cases, we're working with, engineers and doctors, particularly doctors. And so by developing relationships where we can refer clients to different doctors and medical groups, that's really key, and also have those people ready as expert witnesses if necessary. So that's a big part of it. And then also, in addition to those relationships, also some resources, right? So personal injury litigation can be expensive, and the costs are advanced by the attorney generally. So, I have to pay for those expert witnesses. So,
when someone's getting started in this field, in your legal field, how are they supposed to take care of those expenses? Like, how did you start out to get involved in this?
That's a great question. All right. So for me personally, I worked at that law firm for a year, and during that first year, I developed, some book of business. So I had some of my own clients.
Right.
And then I was able to take those clients with me when I started my law practice. That way I wasn't starting from ground zero. And some of those cases were at different stages in the pipeline. So, some of them were pretty close to resolving or settling. Some of them were maybe in the more beginning, and so they might settle months down the road. But that was a very strategic thing to do so that it wasn't starting from totally ground zero. The other thing I'll mention is that in terms of that transition, of course, I negotiated with that firm that I left, and so we were splitting the attorney's fees on those cases, so it was all, reasonable and fair to everyone involved. So it wasn't like just taking the cases; it's negotiated, that sort of thing.
Do people often start with a firm and then branch out on their own in your field of law?
Hard to say. I would say probably that's more common. I think
it makes more sense. I feel like financially it makes sense to, and also education-wise to get, learn how to do everything right before you go on your own.
Right. So it makes sense financially, like we discussed, makes sense in terms of learning, how to actually practice personal injury law so to get some experience under your belt. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess the other thing I would add, though, too, is that in terms of the the timing on all that, if someone is on that career path or thinking about that, I think that it's easier to make that transition earlier compared to later in your life. So for me, for example, I made that transition to opening my own law practice before kids, before mortgage, and before some of those financial obligations. So you're a little bit more free to take those risks. And when your monthly expenses are relatively low, I would just say, for anyone listening, it's a little word of advice. It's easier to do that when you're a little bit younger, before you have those obligations, those commitments, people that are depending upon you. So do it sooner rather than later.
Did you sit down and map this out early on?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, wasn't like totally planned out by any means. No.
But so when did you know that you wanted to do law?
So for me, I went to law school with the idea of public service and political and government work, things of that nature, and had a strong interest in that. When you look at senators or members of Congress, it's pretty common that they went to law school, right? And so that was my thinking as far as why I had an interest in law school. When I was in law school, however, I worked at this firm, and it kind of opened up my eyes to some different possibilities. And so for personal injury law, it's appealing for two main reasons here. Number one, you can make a tremendous difference in the lives of the clients under the right circumstances. And number two, it can also be very lucrative as far as supporting a family, right? Compared to different areas of the law, different specialties, personal injury, you can definitely hit it big if it's the right case, So.
Yeah. So there was. It seems methodical a little bit that you knew that this was a better field of law to get into, that you can build a future into it, and you had interest into it. Which I wasn't just like, I'm going to just float around and see whatever sticks for me.
Right. No, absolutely. Some thinking went into this. And then also, as far as the the specifics of, some of the things that we do are kind of a good fit for some of my skills and talents. And so I think that's important too, to find something that is a good match for your natural talents, whatever that may be. Right. And so for me, it was a good fit. Maybe for someone else, it could be something different, but
when you say your skills into this, what do you feel like some of your skills that fit into personal injury law that match well?
Yeah, I would say communication and negotiation, right? So the vast majority of personal injury claims settle by way of a negotiated agreement. And so to have some skillfulness at that, I think is extremely important. And also not only communication with the opposing counsel, but also with clients, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And now on the flip side, for clients, I feel like there are people that get injured all the time, right? And they through accidents, circumstances, and they just kind of move forward with it, not thinking they should talk to a lawyer or get someone else involved. Can you give maybe some words to figure out when that time is, when a person should seek help or legal counseling for an injury that they've had?
Sure. So what I would say is, if someone was injured due to someone else's negligence, and the person who was injured requires medical attention, a course of medical treatment, that's a good indication that it may be appropriate to speak with a personal injury attorney, right? Another circumstances is if someone is injured due to someone else's negligence and they don't have health insurance, okay? And if they don't have access to medical care through a personal injury attorney such as myself, we can refer them to different providers, medical providers, that would be able to provide that care that they might not otherwise have access to, right? So by seeking counsel, it can be opening up a gateway of resources as far as medical professionals that can see them on what's called a lien. And so what a lien means is that the medical doctor gets paid at the conclusion of the claims process, like typically out of the settlement. And so that's just a great resource to be able to provide. And also, beyond that, it's like some of these doctors that we refer patients to, they can also make for very good witnesses as well. Okay, so like, by contrast, if someone, just for example, say a patient goes to either Kaiser or Sharp, and maybe they have that for their health plan. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but The doctors that work for those sort of places, they're not necessarily accustomed to preparing reports for the purposes of litigation. They're not accustomed to giving a deposition. They're certainly not familiar with testifying or anything like that. And so there are definitely those advantages of seeing a medical doctor on a lien basis because they do specialize in preparing reports that are going to be useful for litigation, that are going to be just more familiar with that whole process and probably more helpful.
So those connections that you're talking about are really important to having the right doctor in place, not just going around saying, hey, can you just, look at this? And there's like, yeah, she looks fine.
Right. So the other thing that makes me think about is also the timeliness of the medical care. All right. So at some of those larger like HMOs or so those other healthcare providers, if you call them up to get an appointment, you're not necessarily going to get seen right away. It may be weeks or even months down the line, particularly if you're looking for a specialist like an orthopedic doctor or a neurologist or anything like that. It's going to be quite some time before you can get in there. And in the context of a personal injury claim, if there's a delay in treatment or if there's a gap in treatment, that's oftentimes a problem for the case because the auto insurance company is going to look at that and come to the conclusion that, well, the injury maybe wasn't really that severe because you didn't see a doctor right away. Now, there could be a whole backstory to that as to, maybe some rational reason, but nevertheless, looking at it from their point of view, that's going to be kind of a red flag, like, oh, they didn't see a doctor for quite some time. And so if through these connections, through some of the doctors that I know, if we can get patients seen more quickly, then it's good for the claims process. Not to mention the fact that, there are some injuries, like particularly with MRI imaging, that if you wait too long, it won't show up anymore. And so there's a huge advantage to getting an MRI done relatively shortly after the accident, right? And so, again, through the connections that I have with these different providers, we can provide that service to my clients.
Now, that's great information. And I'm guessing that time and experience has helped you figure all that process out.
100%.
Right? Like, stay on top of it. You got to get right away and be like, oh man, we've either lost a case or we've lost good evidence because we took too much time, that type of thing.
Yeah, huge part of it is experience. You live through handling cases and you learn as you go. Also do a lot of continuing education, stuff like that. But it's a combination of that.
Yeah. Are you allowed to talk about like what are some of the hardest parts of going through these cases? Like examples? Are you allowed to?
Yeah.
Can you talk about examples. That? Like what was, if you can think history of all the cases you've done, what was something that really challenged you as a lawyer?
Okay. Well, I can give you examples of that.
Yeah.
So say in the context of a claim against a public entity, okay, just for example, say as a trip and fall on a sidewalk, okay? One of the challenging things is that we as plaintiff's attorneys, we need to prove that the city had notice of the dangerous condition, right? And sometimes that can be pretty challenging, right? If the city says, oh, we didn't know the sidewalk was in that condition, right? And then so sometimes we have to get a little bit creative about establishing that notice. And there are different ways to go about that, but that's certainly one example that can be a challenge, right?
You're almost doing like the detective work, like working backwards, trying to figure out if anyone else had any instances of complaining or that type of thing.
Yeah, and I will say very recently, I think this is actually quite fascinating. We've been able to use technology to help in this regard. So, like with Google Maps, for example, you can go back in time and you can look at pictures at different points in time. You can see what the condition looked like a few years ago. And then if you're able to show that, the condition was there for, several years, we can establish what's called constructive notice so that the city should have known because the condition was there for a relatively long amount of time. The other thing that recently I've incorporated into my law practice is the use of artificial intelligence, and it's an absolute game changer. So I have a situation where, it's a dangerous condition on public property, and I wanted to find out whether the city, knew about it, okay? And I sent a public information request to the city of Chula Vista, and we didn't get anything meaningful in response, okay, unfortunately. Yeah. But then I went to ChatGPT and I went to Grok and used some of these tools, and we were able to uncover that the city council had specifically discussed that location on multiple times, and that there's also a government committee, the safety committee, that had at length discussed that particular problem in this specific case. And so it was extremely strong evidence. Now, before those AI tools, this would be almost impossible to find. Right. It would be like a needle in a haystack, right? The minutes of those, public meetings, you'd have to go through who knows how many pages, right? But those tools are able to help us find that.
That's amazing, because I'm going to give you. Actually wrote this article on my website that it was some of the career paths that you can have right now for probably the next 10, 15 years that will not be affected by AI negatively, right? But and a lawyer was one of them, because I was like, you can only go. I feel like you can only go so far with using AI to go into a courtroom and trying to help yourself out, but you're showing that you using that AI to actually help you become a better lawyer, right? So
100%. So you can use it as a tool. It doesn't take the place of you. The other way that I would put this is that the AI, it can give you maybe suggestions on what the law is or even what to do, but a person like an attorney has to actually execute on that, right? So you have to actually do it. And then the other thing about AI, in my opinion, is it can really level the playing field, right? So I'm a sole practitioner, meaning that, I'm a one-man show here, so I have my own law practice, which is, pretty common in San Diego legal community. There are a lot of sole practitioners. But if there's, a very large law firm that might have a ton of support staff to sift through, a huge amount of documentary evidence, that's one thing. But now with the AI tools, someone that comes from a sole practitioner setting is on a much more even playing field here, because it just makes things so much more efficient in terms of finding the evidence and so forth. So.
Have you thought about where AI can take you into other parts of this research that you need to do as a lawyer? Like, during this time where you're like, this might actually work in this other area if I decide to use it?
I guess we'll have to see. The story that I shared about those, the minutes of the city council and so forth, that was the most, powerful and sort of aha moment that the AI is going to be a tremendous tool. But we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, there was a case, I don't know if you saw it on the news, where this woman was, she was actually fighting something against a city that she was living in, and she had went there the first time and showed proof of whatever it was she was fighting against, and the city turned it down, and they were like, you lose in court, you're not going to get this. And then she went back, used AI, and found, they were like, could you help me figure out like what I'm missing here? AI gave her some points. She went back there, she won the case.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no, it's not surprising. It's very useful, very useful. The other thing it's useful for too is also like analyzing voluminous medical records, right? And so otherwise it could take a huge number of hours to sift through thousands of pages of medical records, but with the help of AI, you can do that instantaneously.
Now, there is still this aspect that you as a legal professional needs to check everything to make sure that
of course.
You're not trusting it completely.
Yeah, especially with legal citations. Yeah. In the legal field, there's numerous cases where people have been, punished or reprimanded if they inappropriately relied upon this and didn't double check it. There are cases where AI, unfortunately, has sort of hallucinated things that, cases that didn't exist. And so, you have to do your due diligence, provided that someone is doing their due diligence and they're, verifying what they're looking at, it's still an amazing tool.
Yeah, just outside of AI, since you started, how many years have you been in practice?
So went to law school in 2005
okay,
and graduated in 2008. So since then,
Wow.
So,
What do you feel has been some of the key changes in the legal field, especially for yours with personal injury, that have either been good or bad, that have affected the way that you've practiced law?
The biggest change was during COVID. That's when everyone started to use video conferencing and Zoom. And for case management conferences, for depositions, even for mediations and things like that. And since that time, that's actually stayed as industry standard or expectation or norm. You would say it's like normal. It's for those sort of routine court appearances as well as depositions, the norm is to do it on Zoom now, right? So that is a significant change.
I'm assuming that's helped you work more efficiently in terms of time, right? Like you can get to more cases throughout the day.
Right. No, it's true. It's definitely more efficient, more convenient, less traveling. It does have some maybe disadvantages because if you're not face to face, the communication might be not as good. But overall, has many conveniences and it's economical too.
What is something that you felt like you've improved, I guess, as a person to help you in the profession?
What do you mean by that exactly?
So let's say if you had to speak better or you had to work on concentration, anything, is there been a tool that you're like, this was my weak spot as a person and I've had to make it better to try to help my profession type of thing?
Okay.
Is something you felt like you've worked on?
Yeah, well, many things I've improved upon along the way. Definitely, I would say, the importance of, setting client expectations, for example, the importance of being proactive about, working up a case, retaining experts, taking depositions, all of those things. You learn with time the importance of all that stuff.
Did you improve a lot of, I guess I'm going to say like work not an ethic, but work structures, right? Like you're like, I need to do this better in order to make this flow better later on, that type of thing. Yeah.
I would say, I've always had a pretty good work ethic, right? And I try to work very efficiently. I don't waste any time whatsoever. We're just boom, 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 doing what we got to do. As far as like maybe putting systems in place to improve efficiencies and things like that, maybe retaining expert witnesses slightly earlier in the process is something that we've learned along the way. The importance of that is one example.
And where do you see your practice going? Do you want to ever expand into a firm, have more people working underneath you or with you?
Well, I like the way it is now, to be honest with you. I like the freedom that I have. I like the autonomy. I like the flexibility. We're able to achieve amazing results on behalf of our clients, and we have relatively low overhead and don't have a lot of staff or anything like that. So, personally, in terms of my foreseeable future, I like the setup the way it is, and we're getting back to the whole traveling thing too as well. I like that flexibility of being able to go out there, have some adventures with the family, and so it's a good setup.
I feel like it's for you right now. It's a nice little spot, right? You get to have control. There's not as much stress that you're dealing with a lot of admin stuff or anyone else. You get to control your own schedule, do what you need to do, live your life, and be able to travel, like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there something personally that you think you want to do the next couple years that you haven't done yet? Is there any goals that you have?
Well, every year I always write a lengthy list of goals, and I actually put them on the refrigerator. And we have goals in different facets of life. Whether it's personal relationship wise, whether it's financial goals, different health related goals, even spiritual goals. There's different. I'm definitely a goal oriented person. I will say for the goals that we had for 2025, we're very much on track, and that's awesome. Usually around the turn of the year is when I'll come up with specific goals for the next year. So, we'll stay tuned, but I'll let you know what that is. But I don't have that quite ready yet. But
I have a question for you. So the way that you describe a lot of your structures and being able to accomplish things, if you weren't a lawyer, what do you think you would have been outside of legal practicing?
I don't know. Before I got into this, I actually worked as a political operative. I like that too. So it's quite different, but I still have an interest in that. So maybe that, that's a line of work that I could have been in. But who knows? Who knows? That's a different line.
It's interesting the way the more I talk to you and learn about how you structured your life and your business, that it's rare. I think it's rare to find someone that these are goals and I'm going to chip away and make it all happen, because I think things happen. But it sounds like you've had that going on in your brain for a long time. Like you're like, I'm going to do these things, I get it done, and I'm going to move to the next thing, right? I think that is probably one of the reasons why you're successful in what you do, right? Because it doesn't sound like it's just a legal thing. It sounds like you could have done other things and still had the same success because of the way you structure things, right? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think so. So it's important to have something that you're aiming towards, whatever that may be. Some sort of specified target so that you can incrementally work towards it and have that sort of a goal. And regardless of what realm it might be in. Yeah, I totally agree.
Has Matt ever not achieved a goal in life?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, if you achieve like every single one of your goals, maybe you haven't set your goals quite high enough.
Well, I'm saying, I feel like for you, I feel like there's probably ones that are really far of a reach that you're like, I'm going to try to get to these. And then the ones that are closer to it is, what's something that maybe you've had since you were younger? Like, this is the farthest goal I'm going to put out there and see if I one day can get to it. Is there something like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the closest thing I could think of was like a few years ago, it was a goal to make $1 million in a year. At the time, it was kind of like a stretch goal, and then it happens, and so it's like, and I guess that's a good example too of when I initially set that particular goal. It was, we didn't meet the goal in the particular year that goal was set, but it just took a little bit of extra time. Yeah. And so was the goal not met? Well, it wasn't met on the original time expectation, but eventually it was, so.
Yeah. Now, just curious from your side, as you pick up more and more clients, or you've had clients, are there clients that you're just like, this is not going to be a good fit? And I'm not saying that professionally, I mean that as personality-wise. You're like, this is not good. Or is it like you've built enough of a thick skin through the times of the 20 years or so of you going through different clients? You're like, this is business. This is what I need to do. For someone that's just getting into it, is that advice and you give them like, hey, this is business, right?
All right, I like the question. Yeah. So as a personal injury attorney, the clients that I work with, it's almost like a business partnership, okay? Because we have to work together. It's oftentimes a very lengthy process. Sometimes it goes on for years. And I need their cooperation and communication throughout the process, right? And so from the get-go, if it seems like there's going to be an issue there, just by speaking with someone or kind of that's the vibe that you get, one of the things that I'll sometimes do is give them a little bit of a test to evaluate, how reliable they're going to be. So for example, might ask them, okay, if you can send me the traffic collision report, okay? Simple enough request. But if a prospective client, doesn't follow through with a simple task like that, it's kind of a red flag that, well, maybe this is going to be a difficult person to work with throughout the process, right? Now, I would only sort of test someone in that way if I have reason to believe that they might be a little bit of an issue. But that's just a little technique that I would, suggest. Maybe you can give them a little task and see if they follow through, see if they are able to be dependable, see if they can, work with you. The other thing I would say is that to be on the lookout for is kind of a red flag, is if someone sees every professional as problematic. Right? So if a prospective client comes to you with a story where they believe that 6 different doctors were negligent and their former attorney was no good and everyone that they've dealt with allegedly was a problem, well, maybe they were the problem, right?
Yeah.
So you need to kind of look at that and be like, oh, okay, maybe this is not a good path to go down if they have that sort of a perspective, right?
How long do you remember, how long did it take you to figure out that you needed to look for these red flags in your career?
I don't know. I can't say the number of years, live and learn.
Yeah.
You build wisdom with time. But you just kind of, some clients are more challenging than others. And some you want to, if you're trying to run a personal injury law practice as a sole practitioner, you need to be working with clients that you can effectively partner with, right? And they have to be dependable in several different ways. Dependable in terms of communication with you, dependable as far as following through on the recommended medical care and all of that.
Yeah. And do you think it gets easier as time goes on to spot all of this, and you're just like, hey, this took me like a day to figure out this is a good client?
Yeah, no, it gets easier with time. It gets easier with practice. Yeah, like many things, right? So yeah, for sure, you can spot some of those issues, no doubt about it.
Yeah. What is curious? I don't know if you can talk about this, but what has been probably a case that's shocked you, where you were just like, this is taking me out of my comfort zone to really, for whatever instance it was or whatever injury it was that happened?
Like shocking in terms of the like the valuation, or shocking in terms of
everything.
Like
if there's something that just was like something about the case that just was so that you were like, wasn't really prepared for this. This is a challenge for me to step up, and I'm going to have to do something a little bit different than what I'm normally used to.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a specific example, but let me just say that one of the things that I have seen is somewhat, exaggerations of truth, or sometimes there is some, unfortunately, some, less than honest representations that are made. So that's something you have to be on the lookout for, right? Yeah. So just in general, just to kind of have your guard up a little bit, take things with a grain of salt, and. But I will say in the personal injury realm, it is rather objective, okay? And so what I mean by that is when the cases are evaluated, it's not so much someone saying that they're in pain, right? The question is, really, what did the medical records show, right? So someone, for example, say someone has neck pain, right? It's one thing to say that you have neck pain, and there's probably not much value in that by itself, right? But if someone has an X-ray done and the X-ray shows that there's a fracture, well, now that's something objective that we can point to and say, well, no, in fact, this is very compensable and this is very significant, right? Now, if something doesn't show up on an X-ray, you can do an MRI, and then maybe there's a pinched nerve, maybe there's a herniated disc or something like that. Again, that is something objective that you can point to, and that's where the real value in a personal injury case comes from. And the reason I bring this up too is I think that sometimes there's a misconception, right, that personal injury plaintiffs, people that make personal injury claims, are either fabricating it or exaggerating it, or they're getting a windfall of money, that sort of thing. The reality is that the way that the process works is it's primarily based upon objective measures of what do the medical records show, what's the course of treatment that was required, how invasive was the treatment, what's the cost of the medical treatment, and then finally, was, of course, the medical treatment necessary and reasonable, right? And so even though there can be some issues that come up with people, maybe making some exaggerations and what have you, at the end of the day, when the insurance adjusters and the attorneys are trying to put a dollar value on these claims, the most important evidence is the objective medical records.
It's not enough of data.
Yeah.
You need it.
Yeah. 100%.
Have you ever dealt with a client that just fabricated everything?
Yeah, not in a personal injury case, different type of case, but yeah, and then had to withdraw from representation. Yeah. So more often than not, it's not like a fabrication. It's more often like a little bit of a exaggeration, you might say. But again, the exaggeration doesn't really carry much weight because you're just looking at, okay, if your back hurts, well, what does the X-ray show? You know what I mean? But the other interesting thing that this can come up too is in the context of like sub rosa surveillance, which is like a private investigator. Oftentimes, the insurance companies will hire investigators to monitor what the personal injury plaintiffs are doing. And so, you have some funny examples of that where if someone says that they can't exercise, but there's a film of them at the gym, and that's a problem.
Jump roping.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. Or, I can't hike anymore, and then there's a video of them on a hike, things like that. So it doesn't usually come up, but it's something to be aware of. Not only, though, in the context of sub rosa surveillance, but also nowadays with social media, right? It's a big topic for personal injury cases, is that people should be, cognizant of what they're putting out there on social media and make sure that they're not shooting themselves in the foot or being inconsistent with what they're alleging.
Right. I didn't even think of that. There's just, back in the day, that was something that you didn't even have to worry about from all standpoints. Now, it's like, this person can't walk, but there's a video of them on Saturday night going out to a party, jumping around.
Exactly. So,
I'm assuming you should be warning.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Can you just be like, guys, stay off of social media?
Yeah, no, it's standard practice. Okay. So in the personal injury practice of law, people should be advising their clients of the potential consequences of that, right? Ultimately, it's up to them if they want to use social media, but they need to at least just be informed of the the pitfalls and the dangers of that.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, has social media helped you professionally in any way since it's become popular?
Not me specifically in a professional capacity. No, maybe for some it has, but no, maybe it has its other uses. But no, it hasn't helped me professionally.
Yeah, be interesting to talk to you in years from now. AI and everything starts to change, and you're like, okay, this is where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, the AI has definitely helped, but the social media, not so much.
Yeah. And wrapping up here, if you can go back to your 2008 self and give advice, career advice and personal advice, what would those two things be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay. So career advice, I feel like I didn't necessarily do anything that was, I wish I would have done differently. Yeah. Well, same on the personal side too, right? So I wouldn't like to go back in time and say, hey, don't make this huge mistake, right? I don't feel that way.
Or something that would enhance you better. Maybe you're like, man, I wish I would have known back then.
Yeah. Perhaps taking more risks, that would be a good piece of advice that, to go for it, even when you're a little bit outside your comfort zone, maybe just to give it a shot, right? Yeah.
You think for most part of your career, you've played it more on the safe side, conservative side?
Well, yes and no. I mean, to go from working at a stable law firm to venturing out as an entrepreneur on your own practice is a big risk unto itself, right? So that's a big risk. In terms of like taking cases to trial, I certainly have trial experience in state court and federal court, but the goal, in my opinion, is to settle the case for the most amount possible, right? Because trials tend to be really not only risky and unpredictable, but also very costly, right? And so an analogy that I like to give is that, in my opinion, settling a case is like resolving something through diplomacy as opposed to, taking a case, which, by analogy would be like taking it to like going to war, right? Yeah. And so I think there's huge advantage to diplomacy to try to negotiate a resolution. Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean there's going to be some compromise? Of course, that's the nature of the process. But it is more, predictable, and you have more control if it's something that you can agree to. It's not always possible, but where it is, that should be the goal in my view. Yeah. So.
And what about just to give a younger Matt, just hey, this is something I learned in the next 20 so years that you should probably,
I don't know, invest in AI, maybe. There you go.
That's a great way to end this. Yeah. All right, Matt. Well, where can people find you?
You can find my website, mattpare.com. That's MATTPARE.com. jet.com. And yeah, thanks again, Jet, for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
All right.
Thank you. This person's out of business.